Turn the music off now. I said now.
Officer, I'm not breaking the law. You don't get to invent one.
You don't argue with me. Stand up and show ID.
Am I being arrested, or are you just uncomfortable with a black woman who knows
That's
her
your
rights?
last warning.
Then understand this. Whatever you do next...
The body camera footage would later become the centerpiece of a federal civil rights curriculum, a digital testament to a career-ending mistake that unfolded in high definition. But on that bright, crisp Sunday afternoon in October, Officer Kyle Miller had absolutely no idea that the woman sitting on the park bench, quietly reading a hardcover book, was the United States Assistant Attorney for the Criminal Division. He didn't know that Eleanor Vance had spent the last 25 years putting away domestic terrorists, dismantling racketeering rings, and sending corrupt politicians to federal prison. All Officer Miller saw was a black woman in a public park and a chance to assert his authority. Before we get into the details of this infuriating encounter, I need you to take a second and check something. Look at where you are right now. Are you safe? Are you comfortable? Now imagine if that peace was shattered by someone with a badge and a gun who decided you didn't belong there. If you believe that law enforcement needs to be held to a higher standard, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. We are building a community here that values truth and accountability, and you don't want to miss what we cover next. It was 2:00 p.m. at Greenbrier Park. The autumn leaves were turning shades of russet and gold, and the air had that perfect crispness that brings people out of their homes. Eleanor Vance, 54 years old, was enjoying a rare day off. She was dressed in a thick wool cardigan and comfortable slacks, sitting with perfect posture on a bench overlooking the duck pond. Next to her, a small high-end Bluetooth speaker sat on the wood slats playing a jazz compilation. The volume was low, barely a murmur. You had to be within 5 feet of the bench to distinguish the saxophone from the wind in the trees. It was background noise for her reading a little Coltrane to accompany a historical biography. Officer Kyle Miller was 29 years old. He had been on the force for 4 years, and he had already developed a reputation in the precinct, though not the kind you want. He was known for being proactive, a code word often used for officers who went looking for trouble where there was none. He was patrolling the park on foot, his thumbs hooked into his duty belt, scanning for violations. When he saw Eleanor, his pace slowed. He watched her for a moment. She didn't look up. She turned a page of her book. The lack of acknowledgement seemed to irritate him. He changed his trajectory, stepping off the paved path and walking across the grass directly toward her bench. Eleanor noticed the shadow falling across her page before she saw the officer. She marked her place with a leather bookmark and looked up, sliding her reading glasses down her nose. She expected a polite greeting, perhaps a nod. That is not what she received. "Ma'am, you need to turn that music off," Miller said. It wasn't a request. It was an order delivered with a flat, bored affect. Eleanor looked at the small speaker, then back at the officer. She assessed him instantly, the stance, the hand resting near the taser, the aggressive invasion of her personal space. She had cross-examined men like him 100 times. "Excuse me, officer," she asked, her voice calm, cultivated, and steady. "The music," Miller said, pointing a gloved finger at the speaker. "It's a disturbance. Turn it off or I'll write you a citation." Eleanor didn't reach for the speaker. She didn't flinch. She simply folded her hands over her book. "Officer, this is a public park. The municipal code, specifically Section 14B, allows for amplified sound as long as it does not exceed 60 decibels at a distance of 50 feet. This speaker is barely audible at 10 feet. I am not violating any ordinance." Miller blinked. He wasn't used to people citing municipal codes. He was used to people apologizing, scrambling to comply, or getting angry. Resistance in his mind was defiance, and defiance was something he had been trained to crush. "I'm not going to argue the law with you, ma'am," Miller said, stepping closer. "I'm telling you it's too loud. It's disturbing the peace. Now turn it off." "I will not," Eleanor said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I am enjoying my Sunday afternoon in full compliance with the law." If you feel there is a violation, you are welcome to use a decibel meter to verify it. But I'm not going to turn off my music simply because you demand it." Miller's face flushed. The calm refusal was more insulting to him than if she had screamed. "Okay," he said, pulling his radio off his shoulder but not keying it yet. "If you want to play games, we can play games. I need to see your identification." Eleanor sighed. It was a sigh of deep, weary disappointment. She knew exactly where this was going. She knew the case law, the precedents, and the tragic history of stops just like this one. "Officer, am I under arrest?" "You're being detained for an investigation into a noise ordinance violation," Miller snapped. "ID, now." "I am not required to provide identification unless I am being arrested for a crime or there is reasonable suspicion that I have committed a crime," Eleanor stated. "A noise ordinance violation is a civil infraction, not a criminal offense, and you have not established that a violation has even occurred. Therefore, under Hybel v. 6th Judicial District Court, I am under no obligation to identify myself." The air between them seemed to crackle. Miller was now fully committed. He couldn't walk away. His ego wouldn't let him. A crowd was beginning to form, mostly other middle-aged adults walking their dogs or pushing strollers, and they had stopped to watch. Miller felt their eyes on him. He felt the need to dominate the situation. "You are obstructing an investigation," Miller said, his voice rising. "That is a criminal offense. Now I'm giving you a lawful order. Stand up and provide your identification." "I am not obstructing anything," Eleanor replied, remaining seated. "I am asserting my Fourth Amendment rights, and I am asking you for your own sake to reconsider your next action. You are making a mistake that you cannot undo." "Last warning," Miller said, reaching for the handcuffs on his belt. "Officer," Eleanor said, her voice turning steel hard, "I am giving you an opportunity to call your supervisor. Right now, before you touch me. Because if you put your hands on me without probable cause, you are going to violate federal civil rights law, and I assure you the consequences will be severe." Miller laughed. It was a short, nervous sound. "I don't need a supervisor to handle a noise complaint," he said. "Stand up. You're under arrest." "For what?" Eleanor asked. "Disorderly conduct and failure to obey a lawful order," Miller said. He moved in, grabbing Eleanor's left arm and jerking her upward. The book fell from her lap, landing in the grass. The bookmark fluttered away. The jazz music continued to play softly, a surreal soundtrack to the violence of the moment. "I am not resisting," Eleanor said, clearly loud enough for the gathering witnesses to hear. "I am complying under duress. I want the witnesses to note that I am offering no physical resistance." "Turn around," Miller barked, twisting her arm behind her back with unnecessary force. Eleanor winced as her shoulder joint was manipulated, but she didn't cry out. She turned, allowing Miller to pull her wrists together. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked tight against her skin. She could feel the metal biting into her wrists. She had sent hundreds of people to prison, but she had never felt the cuffs herself. It was a sensation of profound helplessness, immediately followed by a surge of cold, focused fury. "You're making a scene," Miller muttered in her ear as he double-locked the cuffs. "I'm not the one making the scene, officer," Eleanor replied. By now, at least 5 people had their phones out. A man in a jogging suit stepped forward, holding his phone steady. "Hey, officer, she wasn't doing anything. We could barely hear that music." "Back up," Miller shouted at the bystander. "Back away or you're next." Eleanor looked directly at the man filming. "Sir, please keep recording. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am being arrested at Greenbrier Park. Please do not stop recording until I'm in the vehicle." "I got you, ma'am," the man said. "I'm not going anywhere." Miller shoved Eleanor forward, forcing her to walk off balance across the uneven grass. This was the perp walk, a tactic designed to humiliate. He marched her past the playground, past the families having picnics, past the elderly couples on benches. He wanted her to feel small. He wanted her to feel the shame of the criminal. But Eleanor Vance did not walk like a criminal. She walked with her head high, her back straight despite the unnatural position of her arms. She looked straight ahead, her face a mask of determined calm. She was already drafting the opening arguments of the lawsuit in her mind. She was cataloging every bruise, every shove, every word Miller spoke. They reached the patrol car parked at the edge of the park. Miller opened the back door and pushed her head down to guide her in. The plastic seat was hard, unforgiving, and smelled of stale sweat and industrial cleaner. As the door slammed shut, sealing her inside the cage, the jazz music back at the bench finally faded from earshot, leaving only the sound of Miller's heavy breathing as he walked around to the driver's side. He got in and started the engine. He didn't look at her in the rearview mirror. He turned on his computer, typing in the initial details of the arrest. "Hope that music was worth it," he said, a smug tone returning to his voice now that he was safely inside his cruiser. Eleanor stared at the back of his head. She didn't answer. She didn't need to engage with him anymore. The time for discussion was over. The legal machinery had already begun to turn, even if he didn't hear the gears grinding yet. She sat in silence as the car pulled out into traffic, the siren chirping once to clear a path. The drive to the precinct took 15 minutes. Miller played the radio talk sports loud. It was another petty power move, another way to assert control over her sensory environment. Eleanor tuned it out. She focused on her breathing. She focused on the pain in her wrists and categorized it as evidence. When they pulled into the sally port of the 4th precinct, the heavy garage door rattled down behind them, plunging the bay into artificial twilight. Miller hauled her out of the car. "Let's go. Booking is this way." Duh. He led her through the heavy steel doors down the linoleum hallway that smelled of floor wax and coffee. They entered the processing area, a large room with a high counter where the desk sergeant sat behind a glass partition. Sergeant Frank Kowalski was 58 years old. He was a dinosaur in the department, a man who had survived 5 different police chiefs and 3 mayors. He had seen everything. He was drinking coffee from a styrofoam cup looking over a duty roster when Miller walked in with his prisoner. "What do we have, Miller?" Kowalski asked without looking up. "Afternoon sweep. Disorderly conduct, failure to obey, refusal to ID." Miller recited the charges, sounding proud of his work. "Refused to turn down loud music in the park, then caused a scene." Kowalski looked up. He looked at Miller. Then he looked at the woman standing behind him in handcuffs. The styrofoam cup dropped from Kowalski's hand. It hit the desk, spilling lukewarm coffee over his paperwork, but he didn't notice. He stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the filing cabinets with a loud crash. "Oh, dear God," Kowalski whispered. Miller frowned, confused. "Sarge, what's wrong?" Kowalski ignored him. He rushed around the desk, moving faster than he had in years. He came right up to Eleanor, his face pale. Miss Vance, I am so sorry." Eleanor looked at the sergeant. She recognized him. He had testified in a RICO case she handled 5 years ago. A good cop, an honest one. "Hello, Sergeant Kowalski," she said. "I'm afraid your officer here has made a significant error in judgment." Miller looked between them, a cold knot of dread forming in his stomach. "Sarge, you know her." Kowalski turned on Miller, and the look in his eyes was terrifying. It wasn't anger. It was the look of a man watching a train wreck in slow motion. "Miller," Kowalski said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage, "do you have any idea who you just handcuffed?" She refused to ID," Miller stammered. "She was playing music." "This is Eleanor Vance," Kowalski barked. "She is the chief of the criminal division for the U.S. Attorney's Office. She is the highest-ranking federal prosecutor in this district. She signs the indictments that put our guys away when they screw up." The silence that followed was absolute. The background noise of the station phones, ringing radios, chattering, seemed to vanish. Miller stared at Eleanor, the woman in the wool cardigan, the woman reading the book, the woman he had just manhandled through a public park. "Unlock these cuffs," Kowalski ordered. Right now. Miller fumbled for his keys. His hands were shaking. He dropped the keys once, had to pick them up. He stepped behind Eleanor, reaching for her wrists. Stop, Eleanor said. Miller froze. I do not consent to being unhandcuffed yet, Eleanor said. Her voice was calm, but it filled the room. I want the watch commander or the captain to see me exactly as I am. I want the record to reflect that I was brought into this station in restraints. Ms. Vance, please, Kowalski said. Captain Reynolds is at home. It's his day off. Call him, Eleanor said. And while you're at it, call the city attorney and the chief of police. I'll wait. She walked over to the metal bench attached to the wall and sat down. She crossed her legs at the ankles. She looked perfectly comfortable except for the steel cuffs binding her hands behind her back. Miller stood in the middle of the room holding his keys. He looked at Kowalski. Sarge, I didn't know. She didn't tell me. She didn't have to tell you, Kowalski hissed. She told you the law. You arrested a federal prosecutor for reading a book, Miller. You better pray she doesn't decide to destroy you, but knowing her, it's already too late. Captain Reynolds arrived 20 minutes later. He was wearing jeans and a polo shirt, having clearly rushed from a family event. He burst through the doors, took one look at Eleanor Vance sitting in handcuffs on the prisoner bench, and closed his eyes in physical pain. Unlock her, Reynolds said to Kowalski. Now. This time, Eleanor allowed it. Kowalski gently unlocked the cuffs. Eleanor rubbed her wrists. There were deep red indentations where the metal had dug in. She stood up and faced the captain. Eleanor, Reynolds said, there are no words. I am mortified. Captain Reynolds, Eleanor said, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Officer Miller arrested me without probable cause. He fabricated a charge of disorderly conduct because I asserted my Fourth Amendment rights regarding a noise ordinance that I was not violating. He used excessive force during the arrest. He refused to call a supervisor when warned that he was violating federal civil rights statutes. She turned her gaze to Miller, who was standing in the corner looking like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. I am verbally issuing a preservation order right now, Eleanor continued. I want the body camera footage, the dash cam footage, the booking room audio and video, and the GPS logs from his vehicle. If 1 second of that footage goes missing, if there is a technical glitch, I will bring the full weight of the Department of Justice down on this precinct. Do we understand each other? Absolutely, Reynolds said. Everything will be preserved. You have my word. I also want his disciplinary file, Eleanor said. Because an officer doesn't just wake up one morning and decide to violate the Constitution this flagrantly. He has done this before, and I'm going to find every person he's done it to. She picked up her purse, which had been tossed on the counter. I am leaving now. I assume there are no charges. No charges, Reynolds said quickly. None. You are free to go. Good, Eleanor said. You'll be hearing from my lawyer in the morning. And, Captain, get that officer off the street before he costs this city even more money. She walked out of the station. She didn't look back. By the time Eleanor got home, the video was already circulating. The man in the jogging suit had posted it to Twitter. The caption read, PD arrests older black woman reading book in Greenbrier Park. Claims music was too loud. She was chill cop, was crazy. Within 2 hours, the video had 50,000 views. By the next morning, it was on every major news network. The visual was undeniable, a dignified, well-dressed woman being twisted up and handcuffed while calmly citing the law, contrasted with a young, aggressive officer losing his temper. The internet detectives went to work. They identified Eleanor Vance before the police released a statement. When the public realized who she was, the story shifted from another viral arrest to systemic crisis. If a federal prosecutor, a woman with the ultimate insider knowledge of the justice system, could be treated this way, what hope did a regular citizen have? On Tuesday, Eleanor filed the lawsuit. It was not a simple complaint. It was a scorching indictment of the police department's practices. She sued Officer Miller individually and the city for failure to train and supervise. She alleged violations of the 4th and 14th Amendments, but she went further. She used her resources to subpoena records of every noise complaint arrest Miller had made in his 4 years. The discovery phase was devastating. Eleanor's team found that Officer Miller had issued 47 citations for noise violations in Greenbrier Park. 45 of them were issued to Black or Hispanic citizens. In the wealthy, predominantly white neighborhood of Oakwood Heights, just 2 miles away, Miller had never issued a single noise citation despite numerous calls to dispatch about loud house parties. The data proved a pattern of selective enforcement. Miller was using the noise ordinance as a pretext, a legal excuse to stop and harass minorities in the park. The city attorney took one look at the data and the deposition of Officer Miller, where Eleanor Vance personally sat in the room staring him down while her lawyer tore his testimony to shreds and waved the white flag. They couldn't go to trial. A jury would destroy them. The settlement was finalized 6 months later. The city paid Eleanor Vance $1.8 million. Officer Kyle Miller was fired for cause, specifically for filing a false police report, conduct unbecoming and civil rights violations. He was stripped of his pension. Because of the nature of his termination, his certification was revoked, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state again. But Eleanor wasn't done. She took the $1.8 million, every cent of it, and established the Vance Legal Defense Fund. The fund's sole purpose was to provide top-tier legal representation for indigent citizens in that specific city who had been charged with quality of life, crimes, loitering, noise violations, disorderly conduct. She used the city's money to build a permanent shield against the city's own predatory policing. On the 1-year anniversary of the arrest, Eleanor Vance returned to Greenbrier Park. She sat on the same bench. She brought the same Bluetooth speaker. She put on a little Miles Davis, keeping the volume low, respectful, and legal. She sat there for an hour, reading her book. A patrol car drove by slowly. The officer inside saw her. He waved politely and kept driving. Eleanor didn't wave back. She just watched him go, then returned to her reading. This story matters because it forces us to ask a terrifying question. What if Eleanor Vance had been a nurse, or a teacher, or a custodian? What if she hadn't known the specific case law? What if she hadn't had the confidence to command a room full of police officers? She would have been processed. She would have a criminal record. She would have paid a fine she didn't owe just to make the problem go away. Her life would have been derailed by the ego of one man with a badge. We love to see justice served, and watching a corrupt officer lose his career is satisfying. But true justice isn't about one prosecutor winning a lawsuit. True justice is a world where you don't need a law degree to sit on a park bench in peace. What do you think was the $1.8 million settlement enough for the humiliation she endured? And more importantly, do you think this officer would have ever been caught if he hadn't arrested the one woman who could fight back? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and if you believe in holding power accountable, share this story. The more we talk about these things, the harder it becomes for them to hide. Stay safe, know your rights, and I'll see you in the next one.